Hello, hello, hello. Still got my teams up. Good afternoon, everybody. Come on in. Welcome, welcome. Good afternoon, everybody, as you're coming in. Let's get ready to go. Continue our discussion from yesterday. All right, so about a minute till we start. About 1 minute. Again, thank you for being on time. Thank you for being ready. Start in about a minute. Make sure your notes are ready to go. Notes page.
Afternoon, Mr. Grassos.
Afternoon, Jonathan. Hope you're doing well. So, let's see, where are we at? What time is it? Almost time. It's 2:24. We're going to start right at 2:25. So that way we can go ahead and move in. Hey, Devin, how's it going? It is 2:25. So for the sake of everybody's time, I'm going to go ahead and start a 2-minute timer. So that way you can get the objective down and then the key terms. There's a lot more key terms than normal because we got a lot of names today. We're going to talk about all the failure generals that the Union had. And then we're going to talk a little bit about grants, and we're going to talk about basically the turning points of the war. That's what we're talking about today. Today is mainly all about what happened. It's basically like the rest of the war. So that's what we're doing today. Should be an interesting topic. Hopefully y'all are interested. Y'all are hearing all the dings right now, but it's because I'm going to show y'all a clip in a little bit. So. About a minute left, a little less than a minute. Make sure that you are ready to go. Make sure you got your notes ready. Make sure you've got your objective down. All right. Again, same objective from yesterday, really. So if you want to continue yesterday's, you can, but make sure you point out that today's turning points, because that's really what we're going to focus on. Like I said, this isn't, we're not going to spend time on every single battle. We're just going to talk about the major ones. Talked about the first early couple of ones. Now we're going to talk about the later ones and what eventually ends the conflict. So about 20 seconds left. So I'm going to give you the rest of this time. Who's winning in the first couple of years of the Civil War? Why are they winning? So go ahead and put that in the chat box. Chat box only. Privately, publicly, doesn't matter. But start answering that. Who's winning the first couple of years of the Civil War and why? Let's say first 2 years. Who's winning? Who's doing all the winning? Why are they winning so much? Sidewise. Which side of the Civil War? Which side of the battle? Yep, that's right. Should see more responses, though. Why? Who can tell me why? Why are they winning? I got one why right there. That's good. Remember, guys, we don't use North and South. They have names. Leadership, yes. Solid. Keep going. Timer's up, but I want to see more responses. See, what's your why? The why is more important here. Obviously, we know the Confederates, right? South Confederates, but the whys. I see a lot of leadership. I see some home field advantage. That's a good one. More troops. Ooh, not quite more troops. The Confederates have less troops. Poor leadership is why that's I like that. Home field advantage, great leaders, awesome. Okay, so keep putting those answers in so that way I can check them in a little bit later on, make sure everybody's participating, all that stuff. But that's what I like to see. That's all good stuff, right? Confederates have awesome leaders. The Union, not so much. McClellan's kind of a fool general. So let's get into this. We're talking about the turning points in the conflict. Union weren't really. It's a good angle. Yeah, they're not attacking wholeheartedly. In fact, you could make that argument even in some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, right? The Union's not quite into the fight, at least not quite as much as the rest of the Confederates are. So, turning points of the Civil War. That's our objective now. Before we get into the first key point, I wanted to show you guys a clip. I've been promising it. I found one really good one. It's like a 3-minute clip. We're not watching all 3 minutes. We're going to watch like a minute and change of it, just to give you an idea of the violence that this conflict kind of has going for it, and the change. It's not quite as, not that previous wars were not violent. That's not what I'm trying to imply, but the type of violence is different. The danger level is different. It's like the whole battlefield gets bigger. So I'm going to show you a quick clip. It's not that long. There's more of it, but I'm only going to show you the first minute. That's more combat stuff. It's from a movie called Free State of Jones. If you're ever bored, watch that movie. Really good history movie, good stuff. So let me play that for a bit.
Stay with me. Close that ring. Steady, boys. Steady. Rest to the colors, boys. Guys, raise. Top of the hill, boys. Just over that ring. Left, right, left. Left, 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 right, left. Hill.
So that was pretty violent. But what am I trying to get at? Why am I showing you that other than just, I like violent movies? What's the point? What's changed from, say, the Revolution to the Civil War? What's the biggest change in how people are able to kill each other? Strategy, sure. The firepower, but specific about the firepower. What's different? What's changed? Think about it, because there's something that's changed. What couldn't, like, Washington's army do to redcoats when they advanced? Think like Bunker Hill. The drive, modern warfare, shoot the commander. I'm looking more precise. The Navy, sure, kill leaders. No, the revolutionaries love killing leaders. So what I'm looking for, and I think some of you are getting there with precision and stuff like that, but the distance, the range. The cannons that you saw, right, were shooting like what they call grape shot, which wasn't really a thing early on. Like, cannons explode, artillery explodes. You can shoot with a rifle from really far away. You don't have to wait till they're really close. Like, if you remember Bunker Hill, right, like, don't shoot till you see the lights of their eyes. Like, everybody has to be really close. That's not the case anymore. So you see a lot more casualties. So let's get into the first key point. It's technology makes everything deadlier, essentially. So although the Confederacy showed military initiative, they showed daring, and early in the war it looked like they were going to win, the Union ultimately succeeded due to improvements in leadership and strategy. due to key victories, winning key decisive victories when they needed to win, they won essentially, and having more resources, as well as the wartime destruction of the South's infrastructure. And that last part's really important, and we'll get to that in a second because it opens the door for things down the line that are going to be probably you would consider worse. So I'll give you about 2 minutes because there's a lot of key points. But yes, so even though initially it looks like the Confederates have a chance, the numbers all catch up, right? No matter what it is, you can't make up that disparity. And as long as the war doesn't end early, ultimately the Union would have eventually won, and they do. They come up on top. And part of it too is because eventually, and later on, but eventually they get their act together and hire people that know what they're doing. And they also happen to win the battles they needed to win. They lose a lot, but they win the ones that they needed to. About another minute on here. If you need more time than that, let me know. We'll move on in about a minute from this key point and on to the next. About, what are we at? 30 seconds. So again, changes will lead to the Union victory. $20 seconds. More time? Okay. We'll finish out the minute, about 45 seconds left. Try to get this key point in so we can move on. And again, same for today. If you have any questions along the way, type them in the chat so that way I can kind of stop and try to answer them to the best of my knowledge, as they say. All right, 20 seconds, and we're moving on. Need more than that, grab a screenshot so we can move forward. Slides should already be posted. And I apologize, by the way, for the video yesterday. I don't know what happened, but the recording didn't quite record. But it should record today. I'm going to double check that before I leave. Okay, let's move on. So, leadership. McClellan's out. He's gone. He got fired. Which battle did he get fired after? Somebody tell me either in the chat or you can come off mute and just say it. Why did he get fired? Antietam, yes. He gets fired after Antietam. Why does he get fired after Antietam? What didn't he do, or what did he do wrong? Anybody remember what
he didn't pursue after the Confederacy because he was scared? He didn't like conflict, or right?
Pretty
Something
much.
like that?
We can't prove that he's scared, but what we know he didn't do, right, is he didn't chase after the Confederates when he beat them.
He didn't take the advantage.
Right. He didn't take he didn't what's it called? Like press his advantage, right? He didn't attack them and keep attacking them when he should have. He didn't rush. And so because of that, Lincoln's like, all right, that last straw, you're gone, right? So who does he get to replace him? A guy named Ambrose Burnsides. Not much to say about him. He has sweet sideburns, but he replaces McClellan, and then he's horribly defeated by Lee, and he's also replaced by somebody else. So all you need to know is the name, Burnside, and that he replaces McClellan only to be replaced by a guy named Joseph Hooker later. And I'll have the other general up on the next slide after the battles. It's literally like back-to-back big battles that you lose Burnside quits, and then Hooker quits. And then they get somebody else who will also quit, or who will be fired actually and then replaced. So it's not a good thing for as far as leadership goes. And Lee, same thing. So I'll give you a quick 30 seconds. You just need the name. Ambrose Burnside replaces McClellan, gets defeated, gets replaced again. Although he doesn't get fired, he resigns. He got replaced by somebody named Hooker. Joseph Hooker. Most of these generals, by the way, are just kind of like, they don't, they don't really get anywhere past this conflict because mainly they couldn't lead us out. The generals you're going to hear about in a little later in this presentation are the ones that did well and succeeded and got kind of famous. One of them became president, right? So let's go ahead and move forward. Shouldn't need much again. You just needed his name. So Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. That's how you say that, I think. So the retreating Union, this is all after McClellan's fired, fights Lee again at Fredericksburg in December. They took heavy casualties. They lost 12,000 men. And this is when Burnside is the general. So after that defeat, after losing all those soldiers, he resigns. He's like, I'm done. I got beat. Lee destroyed me. I'm done. I got nothing left. So he resigns. And then a few months later, in May of 63, Joseph Hooker, the guy that replaces him, leads the army to attack Chancellorsville. They were again forced to retreat. And after that battle, Hooker resigns. Thing to note here, Stonewall Jackson dies at that battle. Friendly fire. He was approaching his lines at night. And they couldn't see, and the nervous Confederates shot him, and he died a few days later. So Stonewall Jackson will die, but despite losing Jackson, that battle is considered one of Lee's best victories because it's a battle he should have lost on paper, but he didn't. He actually won, and he won so bad that the general resigned again. And then Hooker's replaced by a guy named George Meade. Chancellorsville is yes, Palpatine lives there. Palpatine lives there, it's trees and all. I had a really great Palpatine meme for the Revolution that I'm going to break out when we do review. It's not like it's, I enjoy it very much. Let me see. I might actually be able to pull it up right now, even though it's not that relevant. It just makes me laugh every time I see it. Yeah, it's like right there. I don't know if you guys can see that. Yeah. But I'll put it up in the slide later. About a minute and a half, or 2 minutes, sorry, on Fredericksburg. You need to know Fredericksburg, the date, what happens, right? Lose a lot of guys, Burnside resigns. You need to know Chancellorsville, the date, what happens, big defeat, Jackson dies, Hooker resigns, replaced by a guy named George Meade. You need the bullet points of those battles, those names, those dates, what's going on. Still not looking great for the Union. Still not looking great. That will change. The Stonewall Jackson thing's always kind of funny. Usually, like the really good generals don't die that way. That's kind of like you're gonna die if you're a great general. Like usually, the ones that do die, it's usually like something unforeseen. Like Rommel's killed by like aircraft in World War II and stuff, right? Like all the good ones rarely die from their own guys shooting them, but it happened to Jackson. It was fun. Pretty much. And again, even losing a general like that, Lee, it's still considered Lee's like his masterpiece because it's a battle he shouldn't have won for military dork reasons that I can't get into right now, but he still wins it. Again, he's the best military mind in the United States, and he's fighting for the Confederates. He made him lose his kill streak. Might as well have. We're not. That's a good one. That's a good Palpatine. Although you would probably want to flip it where, no one wants, Lincoln's not Palpatine, but that might make more sense. Because South Carolina leaves and Lincoln's like, all right, fine, Civil War then. It's on. It's like Cartman in the episode of South Park. Fine, it's Civil War. Okay, anybody need more time? Because I'm going to move on. Again, yes? Okay. So we'll do another 45 seconds. Again, to list the battles, and then we're going to move forward. All right. Let's go ahead and move forward from there. So, leadership. Sweet Sideburns himself, gone. Now he's replaced by Joseph Hooker, right? He gets beaten at Chancellorsville. He also resigns. He too is gone, replaced by a guy named George Meade. George Meade is another inadequate general who fights with the Union throughout 63. Meade is the guy that's replaced by Grant. I know before I told you that McClellan's replaced by Grant, but I just meant eventually he will be replaced and Grant's the guy that ends up winning. So if you wrote that earlier, that's my fault. I didn't realize how unclear that I was being. So you might want to, like, it's McClellan, then it's Sideburns. That's not his name. His name is Burnside. Then it's Joseph Hooker. Then it's George Meade. Then it's Grant. So that's the line of secession. Sounds like the Union generals need to get good. They do. In fact, that's why they all get fired, because none of them could get good. The one that got good was already good. While all these guys are getting their butts kicked in the East, out West and further South, Grant's winning. His guys under him, like Sherman, are winning. Like Grant and his buddies, the younger generals that are more, that are taking risks and doing things, those guys are winning battles. These guys up here that are fighting Lee are losing. So what's going to happen is in 1864, Lincoln's going to be like, well, what do I do? All my generals suck. And he's going to realize that he's got one over there that's winning. And he's going to say, hey, you come and fight Lee. And that's when Grant takes over. That's when Grant's going to take over the army. And Grant's actually going to do some winning. So I'll leave this info up for about a minute and a half. And then we'll move on and we'll talk about Grant taking control of the Union Army. But yes, the Union generals do very much need to get good. Grant needed the experience for the first couple of years of fighting under his belt before he could take on a guy like Lee. But if you had like post-war Grant, like 65 Grant or 64 Grant, let's say, leading since the very beginning, this would have probably been a much quicker war. It's hard to say, but it probably could have been. I got a lobby joint. That's funny. How's Lincoln? We're going to talk about Lincoln on Friday. Friday's our Lincoln Day. Lincoln's actually a really good wartime president, and it's not that he's dumb. It's that, so there's a difference between like a wartime president and like a good general, right? And being a good wartime president doesn't necessarily mean you're good at leading troops or you know who would be. So it's not that he's being dumb and making bad choices. He's picking the best guy for the job, right? I get to kind of make fun of them and say, oh, this guy's only good for his sweet sideburns and stuff now, because with hindsight, we know that they weren't good generals. But make no mistake, like McClellan, Sideburns, Hooker, Meade, these are like the best guys that Lincoln's got after the other generals leave to the Confederacy. It just so happens that they are not up to the task of finding a guy like Lee. The gap is too big, right? It'd be like if you had an NBA player playing against the best high school player in the country. The best high school player in the country is not going to beat an NBA player. The gap's too big, no matter which NBA player you get. It's the same kind of concept, right? Like Robert E. Lee's NBA caliber player, and all these guys are great generals. They're just not that good. They're not as good as him. And it takes trying all of the guys he's got, and then Lincoln realizing, well, the only guy that's winning right now is Grant. Let me try that. And it takes like a younger guy that learned hard. Yeah, that's built different. That's built like, that comes from the same ilk as Lee, somebody that's daring. And really, Grant's not that good of a strategist. Spoiler alert. What Grant's willing to do that these guys aren't is he's willing to attack. And Grant knows that for every guy that Lee loses, it's a guy he can't replace. And Grant knows that he can replace all the guys he loses. And so Grant will press and attack and attack and attack. And he will lose a lot of soldiers. But Grant knows that every soldier that he takes from Lee is a soldier Lee can't replace. And so it's part of why he's able to win the war. It's not that he's this great strategist, because he really isn't. But Grant knows what his advantages are, and he knows what Lee's aren't. Does that make sense? Whereas these guys are trying to outsmart Lee, and they can't. Grant doesn't even bother trying to do that. He knows he can't do that. So he's just going to keep pressing. He's more aggressive, which, again, I said it before, right? A general needs to have a good balance between aggression and intelligence. common sense. It's not an easy decision to make, but it's one that he knows he has to make. So let me go ahead and move forward. Oh yeah, Meade also. I have a sweet cross sign on Meade. So we finally got our general. Finally got the guy that's going to win the war, and his name is Ulysses S. Grant. That is Grant in '64, right before he gets to the job, probably. Again, he's been winning in other parts of the war. We've been focusing on the Eastern Theater, right? The part where Robert E. Lee's leading. He's been winning elsewhere. He has his own guys that he kind of trusts that work, I say under him, but with him, like other generals, right? There's always the general in charge, and then there's the generals and the other officers under him. Guys like Sherman, who we'll talk about a little bit, Schofield, who's another one. He has his own group of people he trusts that he knows can get things done. Every great general has their like buddies, their general buddies that help lead. And so he has his guys already, and he knows who, like when he needs something done somewhere else, he's got guys to send to do it. He's young, he's aggressive, he's willing to challenge, chase, and press all of his advantages, even if it means losing soldiers. And he's very much willing to do that. And he will lose a lot of lives. He will. He's not like the best general at keeping soldiers alive. In fact, most of the great ones aren't. And he knew that he could replace his troops and Lee couldn't. That's his biggest advantage, and he uses it. It's not that he doesn't care. In fact, if you know anything about Grant, you'll know that he's kind of an alcoholic, and a lot of his fans will say that part of why he drank is because of his guilt. He feels really guilty knowing that the only way you can beat somebody as smart as Robert E. Lee is to just keep spending lives. He's not like a Napoleon type. Like Napoleon very famously used to say, I spend 30,000 lives a day. Like a month. I spend 30,000 lives a month. Like Napoleon's one of the guys that doesn't really care. Grant was not that. So I don't want to paint him as like somebody who doesn't care about soldiers dying, because he cared. He just knew he had to do it. And, it's part of why he won. He knew what it was. He knew he had to end it. And so that's what he does. So, you can look him up. We'll talk about him probably a little bit when he's president. Yeah, no, he cared. Did that care? His drinking? Yes. Yeah, no, guys, he was a lot of people, and I tend to agree that I'm not as well read on it as I probably would like to be. But a lot of people will say, like, the more he led, like by the time he gets the big job, he's drinking a lot more. Like, he's sober when he's leading, but like by the end of it, like the guilt is catching up with him. Yeah, it's pretty sad. You think that's ours? Probably. If I had to pick something that's the most difficult part, it's probably knowing that every decision you make is going to kill people. Not necessarily bad people either. It's going to kill people on your side. It's true. So he's a good general. I'm not trying to paint him as some heartless one. He just knew that was his advantage that he could do. He knew he had to do it in order to win. It does, but it's a harder decision to make than most. So I'll give you about a minute and a half. You need his name, obviously. He's the guy that wins the war. That's important. About a minute and a half. But it's a hard job. I wouldn't want it, I'll tell you that much. I think I mentioned, like, he's one of those guys that they kind of made president. Like, he didn't really want to be president. It's one of those things. Not as much as, like, Washington didn't want to be president, but he's, like, in that ilk, I should say. Washington, the sequel. Not quite as much. Like, Washington, like, they had to literally drag him kicking and screaming, but he was more of he only did it because he knew he could do it, if that kind of makes sense. Because he knew he would win. He's not Washington's baby. No, I actually think Washington's a better general than he was, probably, because Washington was the type that knew he couldn't fight, right? It's kind of the opposite. Like, Washington knew he had to run away and couldn't stand and fight. And Grant's kind of knows that he has to keep fighting. No, Ulysses didn't get pregnant. Oh, man. About anybody need more time? So we can move on, talk about the next couple of key victories. It looks like we're good to move on. Let me move on then. Wait, okay. We'll do another 30 seconds. Yeah, that's a good photo, Grant, though. Like a lot of the guys that are presidents, when they're the military guys that become presidents, it's hard to find pictures of them when they're still in the military. And this is one of the only ones I think that we have of Grant when he's still a general. Because a lot of the other ones, like if you just Google Grant, it's him as the president. So he's like old, he's got the gray hair and stuff. There you go. Isaac's already got the background. Yes, he's junior. All right, let's go to move forward now. So before you write, because this is a lot to write, Gettysburg is a big deal. So this is in 1964. Gettysburg is a 3-day battle, and it's the northernmost battle in the entire war. So this is Lee's second invasion of the North, and it's as far north as he gets, and it's in Pennsylvania. Yes. So it's some of the bloodiest fighting in military history. Antietam's the bloodiest day. This is a 3-day battle. So think of like 2.5 Antietam's total spread over 3 days. The North will get the victory, though. The North will win. And they will win at Gettysburg, and they will win at another battle called Vicksburg. With those 2 wins back to back, the tide is turned. The North will have the upper hand. And when I say North, I mean Union. And they will never, ever again be on the, not that they'll never lose again, but it'll never be a question of who's winning the fight. So the battles are so massive and deadly during this time in general that usually cemeteries have to be built on or near the battlefield for all the bodies. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is 10 lines. And we'll talk about it on Friday when we have Lincoln Day. But it helped encourage the North to keep fighting for a renewed cause. He got everybody riled up again. It is very powerful. It's a really good speech, and it's one we will talk about tomorrow. Battle at Shrewd Farms. Donovan, I don't get that reference. Is that an Office reference? Shrewd, like. It's funny. The Office, yes, okay. Yeah, I never finished The Office. So I'll give you about 2.5 minutes. You need to know that it's a 3-day battle. You need to know that the Union wins and that they're never again going to be in question. There's never going to be a question about who might win this war again. The Confederates are never going to have a chance after these 4 days. Point out that Lincoln gives his Gettysburg Address at a cemetery dedication after this battle. Excuse me, I've never finished The Office. I've only ever seen like bit parts, like episodes here and there. It's a show that I should finish, but I never get around to. About 2.5 minutes on here. I mean, it's because I'm too busy teaching history. I've seen The Office, I know it, but I just don't. I've never put. It's like 9 seasons, so much. Maybe over break, yeah, over winter break, I might do that. Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm more of a Scrubs and a Parks and Rec person when it comes to TV, personally. South Park's good, but it's an old show, guys. Like I've seen South Park. Like South Park's not one of those shows you rewatch. You just kind of like watch it and then like you just move on. Like I don't know. I've seen South Park, but South Park's one of those that's been around long enough that I've caught up. I never feel like going back and watching old South Park. 30 seconds. If you need more time than that, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move on. We're going to start talking about Vicksburg. Actually, I think we got one more thing on Gettysburg, then we're going to talk about Vicksburg. I agree. Parks and Rec's more enjoyable than The Office. The Office makes it cringe a little too hard, a little too much. It's a little too awkward to watch The Office. Sometimes we're watching it like, oh my God, I know somebody that acts like that. That's horrible. Parks and Rec's more fun. I agree. All right, let's go ahead and move on. If you need this, again, screenshot it. We're going to move forward. So, the Gettysburg Address. This is one of Lincoln's most famous speeches. All right, I'm doing the Trump thing. I'm moving my hands around. It's a dedication to a cemetery. And because of the state of the nation and of the Union, it's the perfect message at the perfect time. So I'll give you a quick minute just to add that to your Gettysburg Address right at the end. It's the perfect message at the perfect time, and it's delivered really, really well. So just keep that in mind. And we're gonna talk about it tomorrow when we talk about Lincoln and his leadership. But it's really good and it's really well timed, and it's just what America needed. And it helps everybody get reinvested into the war. Do I have it? No, I don't have it up. I should get one though. That's when I've got to get a Gettysburg Address. About 30 more seconds, and then we'll move on. So it was already a good speech, but it was the circumstances that made it so impactful, right? Like it was like if you read it, like if you Google it later, it's 10 lines and you want to give it a read if you're curious. It's really good stuff, right? It's kind of like when you were watching, if you all watched Joe Biden's speech and he says, there's no red states, there's no blue states, there's just a united. Like that's a good line. Love or hate Joe Biden, that's a good line that gets people feeling good, right? So it's a good speech. It just happens to be said at the perfect time, which makes the impact that much more important. So it's already a good speech, but it's made more impactful by the times, by the circumstances. So strategic value. You're spinning very fast. It's true. So what do you need to know from this slide? Not much. You need to know that certain pieces of land, certain points are more important when fighting a war than others, right? That's kind of a given, but it's not something that we talk about a lot. So whether it's a river, a canal, when you're fighting a war, a lot of times holding that stuff is a big deal. When you control rivers, you control things like trade, transport, resources. During the vast majority of the war, the Confederates held the Mississippi River, which was like their backbone. It held them together. It kept them moving when they were losing everywhere else. So even late in the war, when they're starting to lose, the Mississippi and that transport, that trade, that movement is allowing them to get stuff done where they wouldn't be able to, right? The North has railroads, the South has the Mississippi River. And as long as they're holding it, they're still whole. The Confederates are still whole. They're intact. But for months in 63 leading into 64, there was an attack, and then Grant will surround and put a siege on Vicksburg. And so who's there? Sherman's there. And you see Sherman's name up there. There's a couple other generals under Grant that are surrounding Vicksburg. Sherman's the main one, though. And I'll leave this up for about a minute, and then we'll get into the siege of Vicksburg and Vicksburg falling like a day after Gettysburg to victory. So about a minute. Again, just know certain things are more important than others, and the Mississippi River is super important. Super important to the Confederates. They lose the river, it literally will break them in half. Guess what? Spoilers, they're going to lose the river. It's going to break them in half. Try to do Joe's voice. I can't try to do Joe's voice. Sorry. No, I'm not. I don't do impressions. My impressions are horrible. I have a bad old man voice. You heard it already, right? My old man voice is horrible. About 30 seconds, then we're going to move on. Talk about Vicksburg. Yeah, spelling Mississippi is no fun. I agree. Can I do an impression? Sure, I can, right? History. There. It's my impression of Colossus. Okay, I need to ask Schaefer to do the King of the Hill voice. All right. I'm going to put that on the list. All right, so Vicksburg. Again, don't write it word per word. They might have. Who knows? July 4th, 1863, right after the victory at Gettysburg, the Union wins again at Vicksburg, Mississippi. Strategic location because it controlled the river. There's like forts and what's the word I'm looking for? Just wow. Forts and fortifications that help control the river. You held Vicksburg, Mississippi, you control the Mississippi River. Well, it had been under siege. And on July 4th, the Confederates that were there in the siege surrendered. So once the Union gets control of Vicksburg and the river, they split the Confederacy in two. The East and the West were no longer connected. They can't transport supplies to one another. They're split up. So Vicksburg is super important. You need the date, you need the name, you need to know what happens as a result. Give you about 2 minutes for that. I forgot they put in the Miss, so they put in another one, possibly. They were like, did we put the Miss in there already? I'm not sure. Just, put Mississippi. Maybe. Yeah, that's a funny one, Mississippi. You're going to have to write it a couple more times. Wouldn't be a war in the South if you didn't have to talk about Mississippi, the Mississippi River. Mississippi. That's funny, Mississippi. You should start calling it that. Don't call it that on your AP exam, though. I feel like if you get the wrong grader, they might not take too kindly to that. It's not the cause of the war, but winning it is a big deal. Oh, because of the spelling, that'd be funny. Again, about 2 minutes. About 30 seconds left. I'm about to move on, so if you need more time, grab a screenshot, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move forward. So we can start talking about, I believe we're talking about total war next. So, turning point. After Vicksburg, after Gettysburg, the South will never again have the upper hand. I've already said this, but it is something to point out. It's not a question of if the Union will win, but when. So if you didn't have that somewhere, you might want to write it. So now the focus is going to change. It's not about strategic victories anymore. It's about winning the war. How do you end this war? How quickly can you end it? That's the goal, to quickly end the war. No, Vicksburg did not create Vicksburg. That's funny though. So enter a guy named William Tecumseh Sherman. He's named after the Native American, which he was not a fan of. He very famously once will say, the only good Indian, the dead Indian. That's his line. But Sherman will be in charge with capturing the city of Atlanta in Georgia. And he will lead a campaign of what will be known as total war in the Deep South. Has anybody heard of Total War? Yes or no? Not the video game series, but does anybody think they might know what total war means? This guy's not as nice as that Sherman. But has anybody, yes, no? Anybody know what total war sounds like? Tecumseh is a cool name. It's not, a lot of wars close, but not quite. Anybody, yes, no? Can I get some no's if we don't know them? Something? Got you get something back. It's okay if you don't know. Total war, no. Attack the people you attack. No. I don't know. Okay, so total war, the concept is a concept that a bunch of people try to do. And the idea is that we are totally dedicated to fighting this war, right? So in World War II, that meant kids work in the factories. That meant men go to war. That meant the women work in the hospitals. Like everything we're doing is for the war, for victory, right? That's what total war means. Now, for Sherman and for many people will do this after him. He's the first one to do it. Total war means destroying cities. It means setting fire to fields. It means doing everything in your power to crush the enemy so they want to give up, so the war will end quickly. This is why in World War II, people bombed cities. Nazi Germany, but Nazi Germany is not the only one that does it. Britain does it, and so does the United States. The reason people bomb cities in World War II is to try to make the other side quit. That's why you do it. That's the goal. And so Sherman's told to capture Atlanta, and he will do it. And he will lead a campaign that will be, well, let's get into it. Let me leave this up for about a minute, and then we'll go on to the slide talking about the March to the Sea. We'll do a minute and a half. So again, the first couple of slides, you can sum that up in, from this point forward, right, the Union will win. So it's a matter of when. And then you might include the bottom part about making the South surrender, right? Sherman will lead a total war campaign. Total war best word. Sherman, that's his idea. He's a very controversial figure because after this, he'll fight in the Indian Wars, and he will very famously say the only good Indian is a dead Indian. He's not a fan of them. But he is also one of the first military leaders in what we'd consider more modern times to embark on total war. He's basically going to fight the way the old school people, like the way the Romans did. And he's going to burn everything that he comes across, and he's going to destroy infrastructure in the South. And it's kind of going to work. So we'll get into it in a second. About a minute left. Actually, no, about 45 seconds left. Yeah, Alex, you were. When I looked up to, your answer slipped through, but yes, when I found it right now, yes, when it's attacking the people. Although, be careful when you say people, because some armies do that, some armies didn't. As far as I know, Sherman's not much of a kill the people in the town, but he will burn the town down. Does that make sense? Like he'll get the people out, but he's gonna burn all the houses down. Does that kind of make sense? Whereas some, like the Japanese in World War II, for example, will kill all the people in the town and then burn it down. So there's different levels of it. So just be careful when you say killing the people, because it's not so much the people for Sherman, it's the infrastructure. So let's get into this. Let's talk about the March to the Sea. So total war. General Sherman, what does he do? He attacks, he attacks, he attacks. After being ordered to capture Atlanta, Sherman will do that. He will capture Atlanta, but continue his march to the sea. You need that name. That's what it's called. He will capture Savannah, Georgia, and he'll move through from Georgia to the Carolinas. He'll destroy fields, he'll destroy plantations, and he'll attack, he'll burn cities along the way. And his whole goal is to break the morale of the South, break their spirits, make them want to give up, destroy their economy. He wants the war to end quickly, and he says the way you do that, you destroy their homes, you ruin people's lives, you ruin the infrastructure. He's kind of right, but not really. Maybe Isaac. Again, as far as I know, he didn't go out to actively kill people, but he does go out to actively burn homes. So it could be that. You could be right. Because he certainly hated Indians. He certainly liked killing Indians, whether they were combatants or not. But he does not necessarily go out and kill all these Southerners. He's not out there like, Southerner, bam. It's more, Southerner, put him in jail, burn his house down. It's like that. Buildings exist, sure. Kind of. He burns down a lot of buildings. He also burns a lot of cotton fields. He frees a lot of slaves along the way. So total war. He leads a campaign of what would be called total war. And I think, is it in your AMSCO book? In one of the books, they talk about I think they call it like the Sherman, like the snake or something, and it's his movement. It's a really good. I couldn't find it when I was putting the slides together, but there's a really good portrayal of his campaign that he led. Right, I can't find it, but it's in there somewhere. Might be your AMSCO book. But then again, who knows? We're getting into dangerous territory for me because this is stuff that I like to read about, so I tend to pull references from books that I've read from years past and. But as far as I know, yeah. So about 2 minutes, then we'll move on. Yes, Sherman's a Union general. I know that painting makes him look like he's wearing gray. He's a Union general. He's a really good one, too. That would be good, Isaac. I know he's named after an Indian warrior, Tecumseh, who fought against Americans in like the 1700s, sorry. And he doesn't like that. He's not happy about it. He's not proud of it. He should be, but Tecumseh's awesome. Tecumseh's another really good military leader. Tecumseh, I would argue, is probably a better leader than he was. Sherman was, just overall, because Tecumseh was so good with so little. But that would be cool. Sherman, any of you World War II buffs out there, the tanks are called Shermans, are named after this guy. American tanks. Also, earlier, I want to point out Total War and Breaking Spirit. Somebody mentioned nuking Japan. Kind of. It's also part of why it happened. Japan's nuked in part to make them quit, which they do. In fact, that's actually exactly why they do it. Make them quit before they have to invade Japan. Because the brass doesn't want to invade Japan. They know that'll be way worse than dropping a bomb. So they dropped the bomb. And it worked, luckily, because if not, then the next step would have been, all right, MacArthur, invade Japan. The Soviets, yeah, the Soviets would have, well, the Soviets were in Germany, right? But I don't even think the Soviets were going to invade. It was going to be the U.S. MacArthur was going to be in charge. MacArthur was really mad that they dropped the nukes. He really wanted to lead. He wanted to capture Tokyo. He wanted to march into Tokyo victorious. But MacArthur's kind of a diva. Were they? Okay. Good to know. Yeah, you're right. Stalin would have wanted a piece of Japan. You are absolutely right. Would have cut off pieces of China for himself, knowing Stalin. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. We need this. Grab a screenshot of it. We're going to move on. Appomattox Courthouse, April 1865. Lee and Grant meet at Appomattox Courthouse, where Grant will offer Lee the terms of surrender, I should say. Confederates are fed. They're allowed to go home, keep their property, keep their horses. Lee accepts, and the Confederates leave. Final surrender is on May 26. And the Civil War is officially over. And when I say the final, I mean like the final Confederate forces, I think they were in Texas, surrender on May 26. And the war will officially, like conflict will be over. Because there's still little fighting going on here and there because, there's no Twitter. It takes a while for news to get out. Oh yeah. You're talking about Russia and Japan, yeah. Russo-Japanese War. First time you see like machine guns and stuff. That's when people realize, oh, machine guns might be important. As a guy, enjoy those. Those are funny. So I'll give you about 2 minutes. 2 minutes on here, and we'll move on. Any questions about the Civil War? Now would be the time as we're getting ready to talk about exit tickets. How does like, oh, because you're talking about Lee because he's old. Lee was, how should I put this? Lee is probably not probably, Lee is the best military mind in the United States. He's a really good strategist, right? Remember, like Grant's a good general, but he's not a great strategist. Grant just knows how to push an advantage, and he's willing to live with the consequences and, roughly, right? He feels bad about it, but he's willing to do the only thing that any of these guys can do to beat Lee. And that's keep spending lives, keep attacking him, because eventually Lee will run out of supplies of people, because that's his one weakness. It's his Achilles heel. It's his kryptonite. It's the only thing that can stop him, because he is, again, and guys, I'm not a big fan of the Confederates. It's hard to do this. Lee is probably the best general in this time period. There's some comic book that I heard about that I never read, about like aliens invading Earth in the 19th century, like during Civil War times. And they all have to go find General Lee and help like lead the world's like combat. Like it's a silly sci-fi thing, but he is the best military mind at the time. It's hard. It's not easy. Like those other generals that all lose and get fired or quit. It's fun to make fun of them now, but they were good generals until they fought Lee, and then they all lost. And none of them are willing to push attacks the way Grant is. Lee's a really good general. He's cut from a different cloth. He's one of those good. He's one of the better ones of that time. Yeah, you're not wrong. One could say he's built different. You could say he's built different. He's just a really good strategist, and there's not a lot of those around. And it's funny. A lot of the really good strategists end up losing. Like a lot of the ancient ones also lose. Like Hannibal. Hannibal's another really good strategist that loses to the Romans, but it takes a long time. Although Hannibal's another guy that didn't press attacks when he probably should have. Like he probably could have sacked Rome, but he was like, nah, never mind. And then he ends up losing. And a bunch of you guys are probably like, Hannibal, are you talking about the movie? No, I'm talking about Hannibal Lecter. No, I'm talking about Carthaginian general. If you're talking about a Civil War army probably win, because the Romans aren't. Yeah, he did have an army elephant across the Alps with. Taking out Romans. He did take out some Romans, but eventually Hannibal loses to like the third guy, like the third Roman. Like eventually, like, who's he? I think he's the first Scipio's grandson or something like that. He loses to a grandson. He loses to a young guy. No, I'm sorry. He's the son. He's the second guy. The grandson's the one that burns down Carthage. All right. So once that ends, that's where I move on. Let's get into our exit ticket. Guys, I was being super generous today, and I'll tell you why in a second. Don't start leaving yet. So the exit ticket today is super easy. It's 5 questions, but they're like easy questions, not even AP aligned. It's not even an SAQ. Full sentences, answer these questions. Why is the exit ticket so easy? It's because I want you, and I'm looking at you, and there's a bunch of you in here. I'm not going to call you out, but if this keeps happening, I will start calling you out. That I see in class every day, and you don't submit exit tickets. If it's in the exit ticket file, if it's in here and it's one of the 4 most recent, let's see. From failures of compromise forward, if you haven't submitted, look at this, 40 of you haven't turned it in. If you haven't submitted that exit ticket, you need to get online and submit it. This Friday, I'm going to start putting in zeros, and not just in Google Classroom. I'm going to start putting them in PowerSchool. So if you haven't done your exit tickets from failures of compromise forward, do that. My gift to you is an exit ticket that you can do in like 3 minutes. Just using the slides. It's super easy. Why is it so easy? So you can take, if you're already done, your reward is, hey, 3-minute exit ticket, you're done for the day. If you haven't done some of these, most recent ones, from failures of compromise forward, Get in there and get them done. Because I don't want to give you zeros, but I will if I have to. And with that being said, guys, we are done for the day. So go ahead and get your exit ticket in. If you have any questions, I'll be around for the last 2 minutes. But that's about it. So get your exit tickets done. Because I don't want to have to start putting in zeros, but I will.